Jurors in Bill Cosby's sexual assault trial told a judge today they were still deadlocked on the charges that Cosby drugged and assaulted Andrea Constand back in 2004, but the judges told them to keep trying to reach a unanimous decision.
The panel had deliberated about 30 hours over 4 days before telling Judge Stephen O'Neill they couldn't reach a verdict on any of the 3 counts against Cosby. So what happens now?
On the Kogo News Live line with us, legal expert, former prosecutor Quentin Brogdon. Quentin, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. So what does happen now here? First things first, they're going back in. They're going to try and get to something. But what happens if we can't get there?
Thanks for having me on, Jack and Marilyn. It's been a conscientious jury. They've spent now going on 40 hours. They've been sequestered away from their family. They've sent out a number of questions. It looks like they're drilling down and focusing in on the consent issue. I mean, they may be focusing in on other issues, but they sent out a question about whether or not what the definition of without the knowledge of was. And it appeared to some they might be questioning whether that definition covers somebody who takes pills without asking what the pills are. And maybe they're looking at that issue, or at least some of them are. And so if they mistry, if the judge declares a mistrial and it's a hung jury, then the prosecutor has to decide whether to try the case again. And this prosecutor is Kevin Steele. He ran on a platform of prosecuting Cosby. So unless, it's really skewed in one direction or another, many predict he will tee it up again. As long as the mistrial wasn't caused by prosecutorial misconduct, and it doesn't appear it was, if it does mistry, then he gets to try Cosby again.
Quentin, here's one of the questions. Can we see in Mr. Cosby's testimony the part where he called the pills his friends? We need to see the whole context. And I guess this quotes him saying, "I have 3 friends for you to make you relax." I mean, I just don't, personally, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding why this is difficult. And I guess I'm showing bias because I'm thinking that they had 60 women who complained about Bill Cosby and that he gave them pills and that the jury is having a hard time with it.
Well, Marilyn, in the court of public opinion, Cosby's already by many been found guilty in the minds of many. But that's been based on that 60-woman, contingency, if you will, of people who've come forward. The jury, however, has only been allowed to hear from one of those women, Kelly Johnson, one other victim. And so they are not supposed to be considering, to the extent they have any knowledge of that through something they maybe knew before, or they're not supposed to be looking at that. And it appears that this jury is looking at this specific transaction, if you want to call it that, between Cosby and Constand. What were the conversations? What were the understandings? Cosby didn't testify. Most believe that he didn't because he would have been subjected to a withering cross-examination about those other 60 women. The defense case was all of 6 minutes and one witness. They recalled a policeman who had already been presented by the prosecutors. And so it appears this jury is drilling down on the consent issue. And did she consent? And if she takes these pills, something they're looking at when they send this question out about without the knowledge, when she's taking pills, and if they believe she's not asking what they are, is she in some sense giving up consent? We can argue about whether they should be looking at that, but that appears to be, at least in one school of thought, what they're looking at.
And if you did give pills to somebody, and let's just say they're Benadryl, because that's what he said they were, Benadryl, not Quaaludes or whatever, and then there was sex and the woman doesn't remember, isn't that still considered a rape?
If the woman hasn't consented and the person who's committing the sexual act upon her knows or shouldn't know or should know that she hasn't consented, then that's sexual assault. And there are 3 specific charges here that are at issue. Assaulting Constand without her consent, that's one. Assaulting her when she was unconscious, that's another. And then assaulting her using drugs to substantially impair her ability to consent. And so what could happen, many of the commentators and much of the discussion has been an all or nothing analysis here, but what could happen is the jury could find him not guilty on some counts guilty on others. They could find him guilty on some counts, and they could hang and be a hung jury on other counts. And so it's not necessarily a full deal where they go one way on all three of these counts. And so the consent issue is foremost, and her credibility, because there's no forensic evidence here. The Cosby attorney's strategy was to put her on trial, which is not unusual in a case like this. Her date of assault, the claimed date of assault, changed over the years. Whether or not she was alone with Cosby before or after the assault, her claim about that changed over the years, and she waited a year. A delayed outcry in these cases is not unusual at all, but that, of course, is always used against the victim. And she made there were 72 phone calls with him afterwards. She didn't initiate all of those, of course. She said she's responding to him because he is a big muckety-muck with Temple University. He's a powerful trustee at the school, and she was director of operations for Temple. And that's her explanation for those calls, but they occurred after the claimed assault.
Well, Quentin, thank you very much for breaking it down for us, man. Very, very much appreciated. Quentin Brogdon with us now as the jury continues, as he said, nearly 40 hours to deliberate in Pennsylvania.